Coughing up her lungs, Chloe stared at the ruthless termination text from her manager. Feverish and desperate, she accidentally forwarded the message to a wrong number. Seconds later, her cracked screen lit up with a reply from a billionaire she'd never even met. Not anymore. Freezing rain battered the warped glass of Chloe Jenkins' cramped apartment window, mirroring the bleakness that had entirely consumed her Friday evening. She lay curled beneath 2 threadbare blankets, shivering violently, as a brutal fever spiked past 103 degrees. Every breath she drew felt like inhaling jagged shards of glass. She had contracted severe pneumonia, a direct result of being forced to run errands in the freezing Chicago winter by her tyrannical boss, Richard Gable. Richard was the vice president of operations at Gable Logistics, a position he had inherited purely through blatant nepotism. He was notoriously cruel, taking sadistic pleasure in overworking his employees, but he harbored a special kind of disdain for Chloe. She was brilliant, hard-working, and fundamentally good everything Richard was not. Her phone buzzed aggressively against the cheap wood of her nightstand. Trembling, Chloe reached a pale, clammy hand from beneath the safety of her blankets and squinted at the harsh blue light of the screen. It was a message from Richard. She swallowed hard, her throat burning, and opened it. "I don't care what the emergency room doctor said, Jenkins. You miss the quarterly audit tomorrow and you're done. Actually, don't bother coming in at all. You're terminated. Leave your keycard with security." Tears of absolute frustration and exhaustion pricked her eyes, mingling with the fever sweat dotting her forehead. She had sacrificed 3 years of her life to that company. She had missed holidays, ignored her own well-being, and practically ran Richard's department for him while he took extended lunches at country clubs. Now tossed aside like garbage just because her body had finally given out, she felt a profound sense of helplessness. Panic tightened her chest. How would she pay her rent? How would she afford the expensive antibiotics resting on her kitchen counter? Desperate for comfort, Chloe opened a new message thread, intending to text her older brother, Liam. Liam always knew what to say, to pull her back from the edge of a panic attack. Her fingers slick with sweat, and shaking uncontrollably, fumbled across the digital keyboard. She tapped out the digits of his new phone number from memory, or so she thought, transposing the last 2 digits in her delirious state. "My boss just fired me for being sick. I have nothing left, Liam. I don't know what to do." She hit send, letting the phone drop onto the mattress, and closed her heavy eyelids, waiting for the familiar chime of her brother's comforting reply. Miles away, high above the glittering rain-slicked streets of downtown Chicago, Alistair Montgomery stood perfectly still in the shadows of his sprawling penthouse. He did not feel the cold radiating from the floor-to-ceiling windows. He did not need to breathe the heavily filtered air. Alistair was a creature of the night, a predator wrapped in custom Italian silk and unimaginable wealth. To the mortal world, he was the elusive CIO of Montgomery Enterprise, a ruthless corporate raider who devoured failing companies. To the hidden ancient world operating in the shadows, he was the vampire king of the Midwest, a ruler whose authority had gone unchallenged for over 3 centuries. Alistair was nursing a crystal tumbler of something thick, dark, and crimson when his encrypted private phone chimed a sound so rare it made his sharp, unnatural eyes narrow in immediate suspicion. Only 3 people in the world had that number, and all of them were currently terrified of him. He picked up the sleek device from his obsidian desk. His gaze swept over the unknown number, and then over the desperate, tear-stained digital plea. "My boss just fired me for being sick." Alistair's superhuman mind worked faster than any supercomputer. He did not merely ignore the message. His vast network of supernatural intelligence and corporate surveillance was integrated seamlessly into his devices. Within a fraction of a second, an algorithm traced the number, bringing up the sender's identity on his massive holographic display. Chloe Jenkins, age 24. Gable Logistics. Suddenly, Alistair's breath hitched a rare, involuntary human reflex. A high-resolution security photo of Chloe materialized on the screen. He recognized her instantly. For months, his trackers had been scouring the continent for the last living descendant of the historically elusive Valerius bloodline. A bloodline holding the key to breaking an ancient curse that limited his kind's ability to walk in the daylight. He had employed private investigators, supernatural trackers, and data brokers, yet she had slipped through the cracks, living a completely mundane, exhausted life right under his nose in his own city. And now she had inadvertently practically dropped herself directly into his lap. Alistair's lips curled into a dangerously slow, devastatingly handsome smile. He set his glass down, the crimson liquid swirling ominously. He stared at the name of her employer. Richard Gable. A pathetic, insignificant mortal man who had dared to cause distress to the one woman Alistair needed, alive and under his absolute control. His long, pale fingers typed a response with terrifying speed. Not anymore. He didn't wait for her confused reply. Alistair pressed a single button on his desk, instantly connecting him to his chief enforcer and legal fixer, Victoria Kensington. Victoria. Alistair's voice was smooth like crushed velvet over ice echoing in the cavernous room. I want Gable Logistics dismantled. Tonight. Buy out their shareholders at triple the market price. I want Richard Gable locked out of his own building before sunrise. And I want his private offshore accounts exposed to the federal authorities. Do not let him sleep. Consider it done, my king, Victoria replied, her voice trembling slightly with the thrill of a sudden hunt. Shall I arrange for his physical disposal? No, Alistair murmured, looking back at the image of Chloe's tired, beautiful face. Let the human justice system ruin his reputation first. I have more pressing matters to attend to. Prepare my car. I have a new employee to welcome. Morning sunlight pierced through the thin, cheap curtains of Chloe's bedroom, striking her directly in the eyes. She groaned, pulling the blankets tighter around her shoulders. Surprisingly, the crushing weight in her chest had lessened slightly, and her fever seemed to have broken during the night. She reached blindly for her phone, expecting to see a flurry of missed calls from her angry landlord or her confused brother. Instead, the screen was dominated by a dozen frantic text messages from her former co-worker, Sarah Henderson. Chloe, turn on the news. Now are you seeing this? Richard is in handcuffs. Chloe's heart slammed against her ribs. She scrambled to sit up, her head spinning with residual dizziness, and grabbed her television remote. She flicked to the local news channel. The glaring headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen read, Gable Logistics, CEO, arrested in shocking overnight raid. There on the screen was Richard Gable. He looked disheveled pale and absolutely terrified as two stern FBI agents shoved him into the back of a dark government vehicle. The news anchor's polished voice filled the small apartment. In a stunning turn of events, Gable Logistics was subjected to a hostile overnight takeover by the mysterious Montgomery enterprise. Immediately following the acquisition, devastating financial irregularities were leaked to the authorities, resulting in the dawn arrest of Vice President Richard Gable. Chloe dropped the remote. Her hands shook uncontrollably. Montgomery Enterprise hostile takeover. Overnight, suddenly, her phone screen illuminated with a text message. She opened it, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the thread from the night before. The unknown number she had accidentally texted had replied hours ago. Not anymore. Before she could even begin to process the impossibility of the situation, 3 sharp, authoritative knocks echoed from her apartment door. Chloe froze. She wrapped her thickest dressing gown over her pajamas, grabbed a heavy flashlight from her kitchen drawer just in case, and cautiously approached the door. She peered through the peephole. Standing in the dingy hallway was a man who looked entirely out of place. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit, incredibly tall with an almost luminous pallor to his skin. She unlocked the door, opening it just a fraction. "Yes," the man offered a perfectly measured, deeply respectful bow. "Miss Jenkins, my name is Gregory. I am the head of security for Mr. Alistair Montgomery. He requests the honor of your presence at Montgomery Tower immediately." "Mr. Montgomery," Chloe stammered, her mind racing. "The billionaire, the one who just bought my company. Why would he want to see me? I was fired yesterday." "Mr. Montgomery respectfully disagrees with your termination." "Miss Jenkins," Gregory replied, his tone polite, but leaving absolutely no room for refusal. "A car is waiting downstairs. Please gather your things. We have a private physician waiting at the tower to attend to your pneumonia." 15 minutes later, Chloe found herself sitting in the cavernous, leather-scented interior of a bulletproof Maybach. The ride through the bustling Chicago streets was silent, smooth, and surreal. When they arrived at Montgomery Tower, a towering monolith of black glass and steel that dominated the skyline, she was escorted past layers of intense security, straight to a private elevator that shot upward at stomach-dropping speed. The elevator doors chimed and parted, revealing an office that looked more like a modern art museum. It was vast, shadowy, and breathtakingly opulent, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city, as if he owned every brick and soul within it, was Alistair. He turned slowly. Chloe's breath was instantly stolen from her lungs. He was without a doubt the most terrifyingly handsome man she had ever seen. His features were sculpted with aristocratic perfection, his dark hair immaculately styled, but it was his eyes that locked her in place. They were a striking, mesmerizing shade of silver that seemed to pierce straight through her flesh and into her very soul. "Miss Jenkins," Alistair said. His voice was a physical sensation, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated in her chest. "Welcome to your new office." "I don't understand," Chloe whispered, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. "You bought an entire logistics company overnight. You had my boss arrested. And you did it because of a wrong number." Alistair closed the distance between them with a fluid, predator-like grace that made Chloe's heart flutter with a dangerous mix of fear and undeniable attraction. He stopped mere inches from her, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. She could feel a strange, freezing cold radiating from his skin, contrasting wildly with the heated blush rising in her own cheeks. "There are no wrong numbers in my world, Chloe," Alistair murmured, his silver eyes dropping momentarily to the steady pulse beating rapidly at her neck. "Richard Gable was a parasite who mistreated what belongs to me. I simply removed the infection." "Belongs to you," Chloe echoed, stepping back, her independence flaring despite her intimidation. "I don't belong to anyone. I don't even know who you are." Alistair smiled, a flash of unnaturally sharp, pristine white teeth catching the dim light. He reached out his cool fingers, gently brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The touch sent a violent electric shock straight down her spine. "You know me as Alistair Montgomery, your new employer," he said softly, his gaze darkening with ancient possessive hunger. "But your great-grandfather knew me by a different name when he signed a blood pact to save your family from ruin 90 years ago. The debt has accrued interest, Chloe, and I have finally come to collect." Chloe's eyes widened in absolute horror and shock as the realization set in. She hadn't just been saved by a benevolent billionaire. She had just walked willingly into the opulent gilded cage of a monster who had been waiting a century for her to arrive. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded Chloe's veins. She stared at Alistair Montgomery, her mind desperately trying to rationalize the absurdity of his words. A blood pact, a century-old debt. It sounded like the plot of a cheap fantasy novel, yet the terrifyingly unnatural chill radiating from the billionaire standing before her felt incredibly, undeniably real. She took another step backward, her heels sinking into the plush, custom-woven rug. You're insane, Chloe breathed, her voice trembling but defiant. My great-grandfather was a steelworker named William Jenkins. He died penniless in the 60s. There is no secret wealth, no mystical bloodline, and absolutely no debt. I am leaving. She pivoted on her heel, fully intending to march straight back to the private elevator. Before she could take a second step, Alistair materialized directly in front of her. He hadn't walked, he had simply bypassed the physical space between them in a blur of movement too fast for her human eyes to track. Chloe gasped, stumbling backward until her spine hit the cool, polished mahogany of a massive bookshelf. I assure you, Miss Jenkins, I am perfectly sane, Alistair said, his tone infuriatingly calm. He reached into the inside pocket of his tailored suit jacket and produced a folded piece of ancient yellowed parchment. He held it out to her. William Jenkins was indeed a steelworker, but before that he was a desperate man facing ruin and the starvation of his family during the Great Depression. He sought out the city's hidden benefactors. He sought out me. Hesitantly, Chloe took the heavy parchment. The moment her fingers brushed the paper, a strange static shock jolted up her arm. She unfolded it. The text was written in an elegant, sweeping script, detailing an exchange of immense financial backing in return for a pledge of servitude from the Jenkins bloodline, specifically the firstborn female of the third generation. At the very bottom, signed in a rusty, dark brown substance that unmistakably resembled dried blood, was her great-grandfather's signature. Beside it was Alistair's, looking as fresh and bold as if it had been signed yesterday. He took my money, secured his family's survival, and then he ran. Alistair continued, his silver eyes tracking her every micro-expression. He changed his name, moved across the country, and attempted to hide his descendants from my trackers, a valiant, albeit foolish, effort. The debt did not disappear, Chloe. It merely compounded. So what? Chloe demanded, her fear rapidly transforming into defensive anger. She slapped the parchment onto a nearby side table. You expect me to clean your penthouse, be your supernatural secretary. You own half the city. You don't need me to pay off a 90-year-old loan. Alistair let out a low, rumbling chuckle that vibrated pleasantly in the quiet room. I do not require a maid, Chloe. I require your genetics. Your family descends from the Valerius line. Your blood carries a specific genetic anomaly, a resistance to ultraviolet radiation that my kind lost millennia ago. My medical researchers have been trying to synthesize a daylight serum for decades. We need a living donor to finalize the compound. You want me as a human blood bag? She whispered, horror dawning anew. I want you as a highly compensated corporate partner, Alistair corrected smoothly. I am not a monster who chains people in dungeons, Miss Jenkins. This is the 21st century. We use ironclad non-disclosure agreements and lucrative benefit packages. You will live here in Montgomery Tower under my absolute protection. You will provide a monthly donation of blood to my chief medical officer, Dr. Jonathan Reed. In exchange, your financial struggles are permanently over. More importantly, your brother Liam's struggles are over. Chloe's head snapped up. Leave Liam out of this. I am afraid Liam is already heavily involved, Alistair said, walking back toward his desk and pressing a button on a sleek tablet. A holographic display projected into the air, showing a live security feed of a dingy underground casino. Sitting at a poker table looking terrified and bruised was her older brother. Standing behind him were three massive, heavily tattooed men. Liam owes $400,000 to the Romano Syndicate, a remarkably vicious group of humans who handle daytime extortion for a rival faction of my kind. They plan to collect his kneecaps by midnight tonight. Chloe's heart plummeted into her stomach. Liam had always struggled with gambling, but she thought he had gotten clean. The sight of his bruised face shattered her resolve. If you accept your position here, Alistair offered, his voice devoid of pity, but heavy with authority, I will wire the funds to the Romanos immediately. I will clear his debt, and I will ensure they never look at him again. Your medical expenses for your pneumonia will be handled by my private staff, and you will receive an executive salary." Tears of frustration welled in Chloe's eyes. She was trapped. She had spent her entire adult life fighting for scraps, trying to survive Richard Gable's corporate abuse, only to be drafted into a supernatural corporate empire. But looking at Liam's terrified face on the monitor, she knew there was no real choice. She wiped her eyes, her posture straightening as survival instincts took over. She was not going to be a victim. If she was going to be forced into the billionaire vampire's world, she would do it on her terms. "Fine," Chloe said, her voice surprisingly steady. "But I'm not just sitting around in a gilded cage bleeding for you. If I'm a corporate partner, I want a real job. Gable Logistics was a mess, and I practically ran it myself. I want an executive role in Montgomery Enterprise, and I want it in writing that Liam is protected forever." Alistair looked genuinely surprised for a fraction of a second before a slow, dangerous smile spread across his aristocratic face. The fiery determination in her eyes was intoxicating. "Deal, Miss Jenkins. Let us draft your new contract." Sirens wailed in the distance, a stark reminder of the fragile, oblivious human city operating blindly below the glass walls of Montgomery Tower. 2 weeks had passed since Chloe signed the new heavily amended supernatural employment contract. True to his word, Alistair had instantly wiped out Liam's massive gambling debt, securing her brother's safety. Chloe's brutal pneumonia had been cured overnight by a proprietary glowing blue serum administered by Dr. Jonathan Reed. She was now the youngest executive vice president of acquisitions at Montgomery Enterprise, occupying a lavish corner office exactly 3 floors below Alistair's penthouse. Despite the bizarre reality of providing small, painless blood samples every Friday to a vampire doctor, Chloe found herself thriving. Alistair was a demanding, terrifying boss, but unlike Richard Gable, he recognized and rewarded her brilliant logistical mind. A strange, undeniable tension had begun to simmer between them, a magnetic pull consisting of mutual respect, sharp corporate banter, and a dark, unspoken attraction. Late Friday night, Chloe was in the penthouse library, reviewing a complex merger portfolio, when the reinforced glass of the eastern wall suddenly imploded. Deafening noise swallowed the room. Wind and rain howled through the massive breach. Chloe screamed, throwing her arms over her head as jagged shards of glass rained down like lethal hail. Before a single piece could strike her a shadow, eclipsed the room. Alistair was there, his arms wrapped protectively around her, shielding her fragile human body with his indestructible frame. "Stay behind me!" Alistair snarled his voice, dropping an octave into a terrifying guttural roar that vibrated the floorboards. 5 figures stepped through the shattered window, rappelling down from a stealth helicopter, hovering in the storm outside. They were heavily armed mercenaries, but their eyes glowed with an unnatural, sickly yellow light. They were enforcers for the Romano faction's vampire overlord, Harrison Cross. "Montgomery," the lead mercenary shouted over the wind, aiming a heavy modified assault rifle directly at Alistair's chest. "Mr. Cross sends his regards. He also wants the Valerius girl. Hand her over and we don't have to burn this tower to the ground." "You are trespassing in my city," Alistair hissed. The transformation was instantaneous and horrifyingly beautiful. His silver eyes bled entirely to pitch black. His jaw unlocked, revealing elongated razor-sharp fangs. The polite-tailored billionaire vanished, replaced by an apex predator that had slaughtered armies in the Dark Ages. The mercenaries opened fire. The sound was deafening, tearing the opulent library to shreds. Chloe ducked behind a massive oak desk, her hands clamped over her ears. Alistair didn't take cover. He moved like a localized hurricane. He caught the first mercenary by the throat, lifting him effortlessly with one hand and hurling him back out the shattered window into the stormy abyss. He dodged a barrage of bullets moving faster than the eye could follow, and systematically dismantled the assault team. It was a brutal, bloody ballet of violence. Within 60 seconds, 4 of the attackers were dead on the expensive rug. But the final mercenary, heavily wounded and desperate, pulled a specialized weapon from his holster. It fired a single thick dart laced with concentrated liquid silver and dead man's blood, a lethal toxin to vampires. Alistair, distracted by ensuring Chloe was safe, behind the desk turned a fraction of a second too late. The dart sank deep into his shoulder. A horrific burning sizzle echoed in the room. Alistair let out a roar of absolute agony, stumbling backward and collapsing to one knee. The dark veins around the wound rapidly began to turn a sickly, glowing silver, spreading toward his heart. The remaining mercenary laughed, raising a silver-plated machete to finish the job. Instinct overrode fear. Chloe grabbed a heavy antique bronze bookend from the desk. She sprinted forward and swung it with all the strength she possessed, connecting solidly with the back of the mercenary's head. He crumpled to the floor unconscious. Panting, Chloe dropped the bookend and dropped to her knees beside Alistair. The terrifying vampire king of the Midwest looked incredibly vulnerable, his skin deathly pale and covered in cold sweat as the silver poison ravaged his system. "Chloe," Alistair gasped, his black eyes returning to their normal piercing silver. "Run, Cross will send more." "Shut up, boss," Chloe commanded, her hands frantically ripping open his ruined suit jacket to inspect the wound. "I didn't sign up to let my CEO die on my watch. How do I fix this? The dart! Pull it out!" He grunted, his fangs retracting as he fought the pain. "Then, I need blood. Unfiltered. Now." Chloe didn't hesitate. She gripped the end of the silver dart and yanked it out. Alistair groaned, leaning heavily against the desk. Without a second thought, Chloe pushed up the sleeve of her silk blouse, exposing her wrist. She held it directly to his lips. "Drink," she ordered fiercely. Alistair looked up at her surprise, flickering in his pained eyes. He didn't take it by force. He waited for her unspoken permission, and when she nodded, his fangs gently pierced her skin. The sensation was intense, a sharp pinch, followed by a dizzying rush of endorphins. As he drank, Chloe could literally see the color returning to his face, the glowing silver poison fading from his veins, neutralized by her ancient, potent bloodline. When he pulled away, the wound on his shoulder was already closing. He looked at her, his lips stained crimson, his expression entirely stripped of his usual corporate armor. There was raw, consuming devotion in his gaze. "You saved my life, Chloe," he murmured gently, pressing his thumb over the small puncture marks on her wrist, sealing them instantly. "Consider it an aggressive renegotiation of my contract," Chloe replied, a tired but triumphant smile touching her lips as she leaned against him amidst the wreckage. She realized then that texting the wrong number hadn't ruined her life. It had awakened her to a world where she wasn't just surviving. She was ruling it. Will Chloe's powerful bloodline be the ultimate weapon against Harrison Cross, or will the undeniable romance blooming between her and the dangerous vampire king become her greatest weakness? The corporate supernatural war has just begun. If you loved this thrilling blend of billionaire drama and vampire romance, smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for the next epic episode.